It was supposed to be a dead shift, midnight to 0400. 4 hours of nothing but stale coffee, cold air, and silence at a forgotten checkpoint in the Appalachian Mountains. They always said those graveyard rotations were the easy ones. No traffic, no radio calls, just frost building on the Humvee hood and the sound of boots shifting on frozen gravel. We were tucked into Bravo, a makeshift post along an old logging road that cut through the ridgeline. 2 strands of concertina wire, a timber stack for cover, and a shack left behind by loggers 20 years ago. That was our fortress. On paper, our job was simple: watch the road, monitor crossings, deter smugglers, and report anything unusual. Most nights, the most unusual thing we saw was a rusted pickup groaning past, headlights dim, driver giving a slow wave before vanishing down the road. That night wasn't supposed to be any different. Diaz was my partner. Corporal sharpshooter, the kind of soldier who hid his nerves behind jokes. Except that night, he wasn't joking. We'd both been awake too long, leaning on caffeine more than adrenaline, staring into a tree line that looked the same as it always did, black on black, trunks like pillars vanishing into the dark. It was just after midnight when the first knock came. A deep hollow crack that carried from somewhere inside those trees. Not the pop of a rifle, not a branch breaking under snow. It had weight to it, like someone had swung a heavy club against wood. Diaz froze with his hand halfway to his radio. We locked eyes. Neither of us spoke. A second knock followed. Same rhythm, same depth, echoing down the slope like it had been placed there on purpose. The silence that followed was worse. No crickets, no owls, not even the sound of wind through the branches. Everything just stopped, like the entire ridge was holding its breath. That's when the smell hit. It rolled in thick, heavy, sour, like wet dog fur that hadn't dried in weeks, mixed with something metallic, sharp enough to sting the nose. Copper. Blood. I gagged against it. Diaz pulled his sleeve over his mouth, muttering, "Something's out there." I wanted to believe it was just nerves. A bear, maybe, but it didn't smell like bear, and it sure as hell didn't feel like any animal I'd ever tracked. I kept my rifle trained on the tree line, finger brushing the trigger guard. Every instinct told me to flick on my light, to cut through that dark and see what we were dealing with. But my training told me something else. Don't give away your position. Don't show your hand until you know what you're facing. We waited. Seconds dragged into minutes. Nothing moved. Then, faint but deliberate, came the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, too heavy for a man. Each stride crunched through frozen soil like something sinking deep with every step. Diaz mouthed, "Truck?" I shook my head. No engine, no tires on gravel, just those slow, steady steps drawing closer. And then it appeared. A silhouette at the edge of the trees, darker than the shadows around it. Broad shoulders, arms hanging lower than they should. Head cocked to the side like it was studying us. The moon broke through for half a second, just enough to sketch its outline. It was taller than any man I'd ever seen. 7, maybe 8 feet if it was an inch. Built like muscle stacked on muscle, draped in thick, matted fur. My throat went dry, my hands locked around the rifle stock. I should have fired, I should have shouted, but I didn't, because in that silence I heard something else. Breathing. Not ours. Deep, steady, controlled. The kind of inhale and exhale that carried across the clearing like a blacksmith's bellows. Each breath fogged in the cold air, drifting between the trees like smoke. Diaz keyed the radio. Voice barely a whisper. Static answered, no command, no chatter, just dead air. And then, cutting through that static, a single word broke free. Hold. Not Kane, not the lieutenant, not anyone from our net. A voice distorted, wrong slipping into our frequency from somewhere out there in the trees. The figure froze, head tilting like it had heard the same thing. And just like that, without a sound, it stepped back into the dark. Gone. We stood there with rifles up, lungs burning, waiting for it to come back. But the woods only gave us silence. That night, Diaz and I didn't speak another word until sunrise. But I'll tell you this, whatever was in those woods wasn't a smuggler, wasn't a hiker, wasn't a bear. And when that voice came across our net, it wasn't just speaking to us, it was speaking to it. Morning didn't bring relief. The frost clung to the hood of the Humvee like crystal teeth, and no matter how many times I scrubbed my jacket, The stink still lingered, wet fur and copper, thick enough to sit heavy in my chest. Diaz kept rubbing at his sleeve like he could scrape the smell out of the fibers, but it wasn't going anywhere. Whatever had stalked us last night had left a mark. At first light, they pulled us into the TOC, a cramped trailer with maps pinned across the walls, radios stacked in racks, and a whiteboard streaked with marker lines. Inside stood Staff Sergeant Kane, built like a stone pillar stuffed into a plate carrier. He didn't waste words, didn't need to. When Kane looked at you, it felt like he was weighing your soul. He had me tell it from the beginning. The knocks, the breathing, the smell, the silhouette, the voice on the net that said hold. I told it straight. No flourishes. My throat was dry, but I forced every word out clean. The Lieutenant Rohr sat across the table, arms crossed, eyes hard, fresh out of the academy, all sharp edges and book rules. He watched me like he was trying to measure whether my pulse gave me away. When I finished, the room was silent except for the buzz of the fluorescent lights. Roas, our comms guy, tapped a sheet of paper with a pen. Net was clean all night, he said flatly. No scheduled traffic, no chatter, no relays. If you heard a word, it didn't come from us. The lieutenant leaned forward. You didn't fire? I shook my head. No positive identification, sir. It wasn't a bear, and it wasn't human, but it didn't attack. Not yet. Rohr's mouth tightened. We don't shoot silhouettes, we shoot threats. You did the right thing. Kane finally moved, pointing at the map spread across the wall. Checkpoint Bravo sits in a dip. Terrain blocks the net. I want a second radio set high on this ridge. Waller, Mahoney, you spool the line, set the antenna, stay on overwatch. Then Kane's eyes landed on me and Diaz. You two log everything. Times, smells, sounds. Don't trust memory. Clean reports, not ghost stories. I swallowed hard. Ghost stories or not, what we'd seen was real. The trailer door creaked open, and Price walked in. He was our liaison, a Forest Service man with a mug of steaming coffee in his hand. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Dark circles carved under his eyes. You boys hear knocking out there? He asked, voice low. Nobody answered right away. The silence was its own reply. Don't knock back, he said finally. The lieutenant gave him a sharp look. You think this is hikers? Price shook his head slowly. Hikers don't knock. Not like that. Old-timers call it wood talk. And if you answer, you're telling it where you are. The room tightened. Even Kane's jaw shifted. By mid-afternoon, we were back in the motor pool, checking gear. I swapped batteries, zeroed optics, cleaned and reloaded until my hands stung from cold steel. No one joked the way we usually did. No small talk, no trash banter. Every man was trapped inside his own head, replaying the night before. At 1500, Price returned. This time, he brought Deputy Hart, a quiet county officer with sharp eyes and a laminated map folded neat in her pocket. She laid it flat on the table, tapping at a hairpin turn north of our post. Locals dump trash here. You'll smell it before you see it. Watch the bend. People use the creak noise to cover footsteps. The lieutenant cleared his throat. Any bear sightings? Hart looked at him a long moment before answering. Plenty of black bears. Mothers, yearlings, but whatever you smelled, she shook her head. Wasn't a bear. She studied me. What did it smell like? Wet dog. Blood, I said. She exhaled, slow, like she'd been waiting for that answer. If you smell it again and you can't find the source, don't chase it. Her voice didn't waver. That made it worse. Kane cut her off with orders. You heard the deputy. Tonight, same checkpoint. Alpha team rotates in. Tighter spacing. No white light unless you're in a fight. Thermals mounted. Record everything. Comms checks every 15. We nodded, but no one looked convinced. As dusk fell, we rolled back toward Bravo. The road narrowed, trees closing in like ribs of a cage. Ice cracked under our tires. The air had that hard, brittle quality where every breath felt like glass scraping your lungs. Price had been right about the bend. We smelled the trash before we saw it. Rot, rust, and mildew piling up where the locals dumped what no one wanted. A broken fridge, tires, a couch chewed to stuffing. The kind of junk that turns a place sour before you even set foot. We parked behind the timber stack, same as before. Same open cut of road, same shadows stretching deep into the forest. The Humvee ticked as the engine cooled. The forest settled heavy around us. Roas and Waller climbed the ridge to check the antenna. The deputy's unit blinked once from a hill far off. A little blue square swallowed by pines. Diaz sat beside me, quiet. Too quiet. His hand kept brushing the stock of his rifle like a nervous tick. Doc Singh cracked hand warmers and tucked them into his gloves one by one like a prayer. I checked my radio. Battery full, net clean. Thermals washed the tree line in gray. Breath plumes from our mouths were the only heat it found. Still, I couldn't shake the thought that kept gnawing at me since last night. That word on the net. Hold. It hadn't just been for us. It had been for whatever was out there in the dark. And that thought, that the mountain itself could hear us, was worse than anything else. Night drops fast in the Appalachians. One moment you can still see frost glittering on pine needles, and the next, it's just black, heavy, and absolute. Checkpoint Bravo never felt smaller than it did under that dark, a timber stack, a half-collapsed shack, and a handful of soldiers huddled against the cold. That was all that stood between us and whatever prowled the ridgeline. Our orders were simple on paper. 4-hour shifts, 2 on the road, 1 on thermal, 1 on radio. Rotate every 60 minutes, log everything: sounds, smells, movement, even wind direction. The kind of routine meant to keep you grounded. But routines don't help when the mountain itself feels alive. The first hour ticked by with nothing but static on the net and the sound of snow shifting under boots. I stood road watch with Diaz, staring into trees that looked like prison bars in the moonlight. He didn't crack jokes like usual, just kept his rifle tight against his vest, jaw clenching every few minutes. The logbook sat on a crate, its pages stiff from the cold. We logged the basics. 1815, wind steady from the north. 1840, coyotes audible to the west. 100 hell, creek louder than usual, ice breaking. Nothing special, nothing worth remembering. Then at 1935, the first anomaly. Diaz sniffed the air, face twisting. He wrote one word in the logbook: dog. No one laughed, no one corrected him. That smell, wet fur and blood, crawled in low, just faint enough to make your stomach knot. Waller swept the thermal scope. Negative, only small fauna. His clipped voice always sounded like a report, but his eyes told a different story. He kept sweeping long after he'd said the word negative. By 2100, morale was sinking. We rotated stations. I moved to the radio, comforted by the simple rhythm of comms checks. Kane's voice crackled through every 15 minutes, grounding us. As long as the net stayed clean, it felt like we weren't alone out there. But the little things started stacking. At 2:14:45, I noticed a chem light missing from the timber stack. I'd placed 3 earlier, evenly spaced like range markers. Now there were 2, snow beneath untouched, no drag marks, no footprints, just gone. I logged it, my handwriting shook. At 22:10, the clicking started. 2 stones tapping together, slow, deliberate. 3 clicks, pause, 2 clicks, over and over, not random, a pattern. Diaz stiffened. You hear that? We all did. Even Doc Singh, who tried to keep calm, muttered something under his breath in Punjabi. Waller swung the thermal toward the sound. Negative, he whispered, but his voice cracked on the word. The clicking carried on for 10 minutes, circling just beyond our sight, then stopped as suddenly as it began. I logged it. At 2300, the lieutenant's voice came through, calm but clipped. Bravo, Sitrep. Kane answered before I could. Minor anomalies logged, no contact. Continuing observation. There was a pause, then Rar's voice again. Stay disciplined. Remember your ROE. Diaz smirked bitterly. Rules of engagement against ghosts, he muttered. No one corrected him. By midnight, the air shifted. Hard to explain unless you felt it. The forest goes dead. No wind, no insects, no creek. Just silence pressing down until even your heartbeat feels too loud. Then the smell returned. Stronger, heavier, thick enough to make Singh gag into his sleeve. Thermal sweep, I ordered. Waller scanned. Negative, he said, but his eyes were wide. A branch snapped deep in the trees. Then another. Slow, purposeful, like something was circling, closing in. Diaz leaned close, whispering, "It's probing." I wanted to tell him not to say it, but I couldn't. because I felt it too. We held discipline, rifles up, eyes locked. Every sound logged. My pen dragged across the paper, letters jagged from the tremor in my hand. Then, at 0100, the scream, it ripped across the ridge, rattling through bone and marrow, high and low at the same time, layered like two voices screaming together. Not animal, not human, something in between. Doc Singh muttered a prayer. Diaz gripped his rifle so hard his knuckles cracked white. I keyed the mic, voice tight, audio contact, unknown source, coordinates logged. The scream faded, but the silence after was worse. Too empty, like the forest itself was waiting for us to break. Hours dragged. We rotated again, pretending it was just another night. But every man knew better. At 0300, I scrawled one final line into the log before my shift ended. It knows we are here. And the worst part? I believed it. By the fourth night on Bravo, the tension had hardened into our bones. We told ourselves the routine would ground us, rotate shifts, check comms, log the hours, but instead, each step of the schedule just made the silence heavier. Every sound carried intent. Every gust of wind felt like it was hiding something. I was back on the radio at 0100, headset pressed tight, scribbling notes about wind direction when Diaz stiffened beside me. His head snapped toward the tree line, rifle already halfway up. Movement, he whispered. I set the handset down and pulled up my NVGs. At first, nothing, just green shadows stacked on shadows. Then between two pines, something shifted. Slow, massive. Not a deer, not a man. Thermal, confirm, I ordered. Waller's scope hummed as he swept. Negative. No heat. Diaz's whisper cracked with anger. Don't tell me it's not there. I saw it. Then the smell hit us, stronger than ever. Wet fur, copper, rot, thick enough to choke. Doc Singh muttered, God help us. Branches snapped, closer this time. Heavy weight pressing into frozen ground. The vibration rattled through our boots. Bravo, report. Kane's voice cut into my ear. I keyed the mic. Unidentified movement, inside 100 meters. Negative thermal, strong odor. Request guidance. Static answered. Say again. I tried, voice sharp. Still nothing but hiss. Diaz muttered, it's jamming us. His voice shook, but his eyes were hard. Then 3 sharp knocks. Wood on wood, deliberate. We all froze. Another knock answered from deeper in the forest. Then another, behind us. The knocks bounced back and forth, 2 sources talking in patterns we couldn't understand. That's impossible, Waller whispered, scanning. Eyes out, I snapped, though my voice cracked. The forest went silent again. Diaz's eyes widened. Contact left flank. I turned just as a blur exploded from the tree line. Massive, low to the ground. Moving faster than anything that size should. Diaz fired 3 bursts, muzzle flashes strobing the trees. Brass sprayed into the snow. The shape veered, impossibly quick, slamming into the timber stack. Logs clattered loose. One rolled and stopped at my boots. Diaz kept firing, panic bursts ripping the night apart. Cease, cease, I shouted, dragging his barrel down. The smell swamped us. Musky, metallic, choking. We held, rifles up, scanning. The timber stack loomed silent. Thermal sweep, I barked. Waller crouched, lens glowing. Negative, nothing. I forced myself forward, rifle raised. Each step felt like dragging concrete. I swept with NVGs, nothing but bark stripped clean where something massive had slammed. Then low and guttural, a growl. Not in front of me. Above me, I tilted my head, and there it was. Perched on top of the timber stack, 8 feet tall. Dark, matted hair. Shoulders like boulders, arms too long, hanging low. Its head sloped into a conical peak, and its eyes, God, its eyes. They reflected faint light with an unnatural shine, locking on me like it already knew my name. My chest seized. My rifle felt like a toy. It let out a noise that wasn't just sound, a deep rumble that vibrated through the ground, into my ribs, into my teeth. My knees wobbled under it. Then it leapt, not down at us, away. One impossible bound, clearing the timber stack, vanishing into the trees. Snow shook loose from branches, then silence. Diaz's voice broke the air. "It's real. It's real." I keyed the mic again, hands trembling. "Bravo actual to command. We had contact. Large unknown entity breached perimeter. Shots fired. No casualties. Negative confirmation of kill. Request immediate response." Static hissed back. Then through the hiss, Diaz's voice. Calm, flat, hold. But Diaz was standing right next to me. We all heard it, and the forest swallowed us back into silence. By the next rotation, none of us trusted the clock anymore. Hours didn't feel like hours. They dragged like days, then snapped past in jolts. The mountain played tricks with time, same as it did with sound. Diaz was jittery, pacing like a caged animal, muttering under his breath. His rifle never left his hands. The others avoided looking at him. We all knew the same thing. He was fraying and fast. At 0200, Waller cursed softly. His thermal scope flickered, then locked onto something at the far tree line. "Humanoid. 7, maybe 8 feet, he said, voice clipped, professional. But his tone gave him away. Too upright to be a bear. Too big to be a man." Diaz whispered. "It's him." I keyed the mic. "Bravo to command. Contact east tree line. Thermal positive. Grid coordinates to follow." The lieutenant came back, his voice too calm. "Maintain observation. Do not engage." We held position, watched the silhouette flicker in and out, stepping between trees like it was blinking in and out of existence. Diaz's hand shook so hard, his barrel wavered. "It's toying with us," he hissed. Then the net cut out. Static swallowed everything. And the knocks started. 3, farther off, answered by 2, closer in. Then another behind us, encircling. The smell rolled in, thick and choking, curling around us like fog. Singh gagged. "God, it's close." Waller's thermal glitched. The silhouette split in 2, then 3 shapes blinking across the tree line. "Which one's real?" I asked. "I don't know," Waller whispered. Diaz snapped. "I'm done waiting." He raised his rifle. "Hold," I barked. ROE, no positive ID. But Diaz didn't hear, or didn't care. A thunderous knock shook the timber pile, echoing like a sledgehammer on steel. Diaz broke. He sprinted forward, firing wild, tracer rounds cutting green arcs into the dark. "Cease, cease," I shouted. But he kept running, muzzle flash strobes chasing shadows. Then movement, heavy, fast, circling behind him. "Diaz, stop." Kane's voice cracked through the net, sharp as a blade. Diaz vanished into the trees. The smell swamped us, choking, suffocating. Then the scream. Not layered, not inhuman. Human. Diaz. High, panicked, cut short mid-breath. Ice seized my chest. My boots locked in the snow. "Move," Kane barked. We charged into the tray line, rifles sweeping, NVGs glowing. No Diaz. No blood. Just snow trampled flat in a wide circle, as if something had spun around him, erasing every trace. The smell lingered, heavy as lead. Singh dropped to his knees, whispering prayers. Waller spun his thermal frantically. "Negative, nothing, it's gone." Then the radio cracked. Diaz's voice came through, calm, flat, wrong. "Hold." Every man froze. It wasn't just him. Beneath his tone was another sound, a guttural undertone, layered like a second voice riding inside his... "That's not him," Singh whispered. We pulled back to Bravo in silence, rifles trembling, hearts hammering. Diaz was gone, taken. And the mountain wasn't just stalking us anymore. It was speaking through us. They told us we were rotating out. That was the official line. Bravo team had logged enough hours, seen enough anomalies. Command didn't want us cracking, but we knew better. Diaz was gone, vanished into the trees, his voice crawling out of our radios after the fact. Waller was concussed from the timber strike, Mahoney bruised from shoulder to ribs, Singh shaken to the core. None of us had slept more than an hour at a stretch. And yet, instead of pulling us back to base, Kane lined us up in the motor pool. "This isn't over," he said, voice like gravel dragged across metal. "We're not leaving Diaz behind. Not like this." No one argued, not out loud, but every man's face told the same story. We weren't hunting for a missing corporal. We were walking back into the mountain's mouth, knowing it might not spit us back out. 2 fire teams, full kit, NVGs, thermals, every magazine we could carry. Kane led. Roar stayed behind with radios. Sighting protocol. No one complained. The sun was already dying when we moved out. The ridge leaned over us like a cage, trees crowding tighter the deeper we pushed. Snow fell in thin, silent flakes, masking our footprints as soon as we made them. The only sounds were gear clinking and the crunch of boots. Even that seemed muted, like the forest swallowed it whole. We reached the clearing where Diaz had vanished. The snow circle was still there, wide and perfect, untouched by new fall. No tracks in, no tracks out, just a void stamped into the earth like the mountain itself had erased him. Singh whispered, "Not natural." Kane crouched, studying the ground. His breath plumed white. "Perimeter, hold tight. Waller, sweep thermal." Waller scanned, his breathing loud in the mic. "Negative, just us." But then the smell rolled in, stronger than before. Thick, wet fur, copper and rot clinging to our gear, to our skin. Mahoney muttered, "Christ, it's close." That's when the knocks started. One to our left, answered by another on the right, then a third, behind us. Deliberate, slow, closing in. We swung rifles, barrels chasing echoes. Kane's voice cut steady through the net. "Bravo, actual. Unknown contacts on all sides. Request immediate QRF." Static hissed back. Then a voice broke through. Diaz. Not panic, not screaming. Calm, cold, hold. But it wasn't just him. His voice rode under something deeper, a guttural undertone that vibrated in the chest more than the ears. Singh whispered, "That's not him." The forest erupted. A shape burst from the trees, massive, fast, barreling into Mahoney. He flew 10 yards before slamming against a trunk, screaming once before it cut off. We opened fire. A wall of gunfire shredded the tree line. Mi-4s barked, tracers stitched green light, splinters exploded from bark. The creature barreled through it. 8 feet tall, shoulders wide as a doorway, eyes glowing faint in the NVGs. I fired center mass, round after round. It staggered but didn't fall. It swiped one massive arm, knocking Waller clean off his feet. His helmet cracked against stone. He went limp. Kane stepped forward, the M24 roaring in his hands. Brass poured at his boots. The beast howled, a guttural roar that shook the trees. Then another knock answered. Closer. Shapes moved in the shadows. More of them. My stomach dropped. There wasn't just one. We were surrounded. Fall back, Kane barked. To the creek. Move. We broke, firing in bursts to cover each other. Snow sprayed, rounds cracked, shadows darted too fast between trees. Mahoney crawled, blood streaking behind him. Singh hauled him by the vest, teeth gritted. I kept firing, lungs burning, rifle hot in my hands. Something shifted in my NVGs, a blur too close. I swung and fired, hitting only bark. The creek shimmered ahead, black water under broken ice. We formed a line along the bank, rifles raised, breath fogging in thick clouds. Kane planted the saw on a log, eyes hard. The woods went dead silent. Then movement. They stepped into view across the creek. 3 of them, massive, covered in thick, matted fur, shoulders hunched, arms dragging close to the ground, eyes reflecting pale light. The biggest stood in the middle, chest scarred, fur torn, pale skin showing beneath. It opened its mouth, and the sound wasn't a growl. It was words, broken, wrong. Untold. My rifle nearly slipped from my hands. They're speaking, Singh whispered, voice shaking. Kane didn't wait. The saw roared, ripping fire into the tree line. We joined in. Grenades thumped, explosions tore trees apart. For a heartbeat, we thought we had them. One staggered. Another dropped to a knee, howling. But the leader didn't stop. It waded the creek in 2 strides, water exploding around its legs. Kane opened fire point blank. The beast crashed into him like a freight train, swatting the saw aside. Kane hit the ground hard, coughing blood. I fired 3-round bursts into its side. It turned on me, eyes locked, intelligent. Then a knock from deeper in the woods. The leader froze, the others froze with it. And just like that, they pulled back, silent, vanishing into the tree line, gone as fast as they came. We were left gasping, rifles trembling, wounded bleeding in the snow. Kane staggered to his feet, blood streaking his lips. His voice rasped, "They let us live." None of us argued, because we knew he was right. They could have finished us. They didn't. They were testing us. And the next test, we might not survive. They pulled us off the ridge before sunrise. Officially, it was rotation. Unofficially, Kane admitted what we all knew: we weren't in fighting shape. 2 wounded, 1 missing, and the rest of us cracked open at the seams. Mahoney was medevaced out, his ribs shattered, skull fractured, blood still soaking the collar of his vest. Singh rode with him all the way down, refusing to leave his side. Waller sat slumped in the aid tent with a concussion so bad he couldn't keep his balance. His eyes rolled when he tried to stand, and his hands shook like he was still holding his rifle. That left me, Kane, and a handful of men whose faces looked 10 years older than they had yesterday. We moved gear into trucks with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Every slam of a Humvee door made us flinch. No one asked about Diaz. They didn't need to. The mountain had him. And whatever spoke in his voice over the net wasn't him anymore. Back at the TOC, the lieutenant sat at a folding table with papers spread in neat rows. His report was clean, clinical, stripped of every truth. Unconfirmed wildlife encounter. 1 missing soldier presumed AWOL. 2 wounded in a training accident. The words were tidy, easy to file, easy to bury. But when he read them aloud, not one man in that tent believed a syllable. Kane didn't argue on paper. He knew the drill. But when the lieutenant left the room, Kane leaned over the table, knuckles grinding into the wood. His voice dropped low enough that only we could hear. "Headquarters doesn't get the truth. We do. Tomorrow night we go looking. No one else disappears." His tone left no room for debate. The platoon scattered after that. Singh came back from the medevac pale and silent. He didn't talk about Mahoney, didn't talk at all, just sat cleaning his rifle like prayer beads, each motion mechanical. Waller was grounded, his head wrapped, orders not to move. He stared at the ceiling like he was replaying every second of the timber strike. Kane stayed upright, but there was something different in his eyes. Less like a leader holding the line, more like a man who knew the line was already gone. I tried to sleep, stretched out on a cot, boots still on, staring at canvas above me. But every time my eyes closed, I saw the same thing. Those glowing eyes from the timber stack, the leader stepping into the creek, its mouth twisting around a word it shouldn't know. Told. I thought hold was command, a call to us. But what if it wasn't? What if it was for them? The thought burned through my skull like acid. I rolled out of bed before dawn, still wired, and wandered toward the comms tent. Roas was in there, pale, sweating, a headset crooked on his neck. Static hissed through the speakers. "You hear it again?" I asked. He didn't look up, just nodded. The hiss bled, warped, then bent into a shape that made my blood run cold. Hold. Diaz's voice again. Flat. Wrong. But underneath, a chorus this time, layered, not just one. I yanked the headset off his desk like it was poison. Shut it down. Roach just stared at me. It's not just him anymore. By afternoon, Kane had us back in the motor pool, loading magazines, checking optics, running drills like muscle memory would save us from what was waiting. The lieutenant barked about protocol, about command, about how discipline wins wars. But none of us believed him. Price, the Forest Service liaison, stood in the corner with another cup of stale coffee. He hadn't shaved. His eyes looked older than the hills. "You boys ever think maybe this isn't your fight?" he asked. Kane snapped his head toward him. "That mountain took one of ours. That makes it my fight." Price didn't flinch, just sipped his coffee, then set it down. "You don't fight the mountain, you endure it, or you leave." His words hung like smoke. The lieutenant scoffed. "Superstition doesn't guide military operations." Price gave him a tired smile. "Neither do reports that pretend nothing happened." The tent went silent after that. By dusk, we rolled out again. 2 fire teams, Kane leading, Sing back on his feet but hollow-eyed. Me behind the wheel, my hands locked white on the steering column. The ridge loomed like teeth against a blood-red sky. The forest swallowed the last of the light, and the cold pressed in harder than before. We reached the clearing where Diaz had vanished. The snow circle was still there, perfect, untouched. We formed a perimeter, thermals scanned, logs sat ready, radios checked, and then, without warning, the net bled static. The voice came again, Diaz. But this time, it wasn't just the word. We see you. My throat closed. My pen shook across the logbook. The forest wasn't just watching anymore. It was listening. The voice on the net said, "We see you," and every man in that tent heard the same thing I did. We weren't just being watched, we were being measured. Kane didn't pace. He never paced. He stood very still, eyes on the map like he could will the terrain to tell the truth. "We changed the problem," he said. "They're listening, then we control what they hear." He laid it out in short, soldier-proof sentences. Challenge, response only. No one moves on a single word command. Authentication by brevity words, randomized every 15. Decoy mic array at the hairpin dump. Old fridge and couch will mask the speaker. IR trip lines across the approach. Chem lights black taped except one slit for bleed. Acoustic loggers on opposite pines to triangulate knocks. Peel and funnel back to the creek if we're pressed. Price watched from the doorway, arms folded into his canvas jacket. "If it answers you," he said, "don't answer back." He stared at the floor as if the boards might answer for us. "Old-timers say that's how it counts you." "Then let it count decoys," Kane said. Waller was still grounded with the concussion, so I took his thermal. Hobbs quiet, rope-muscled, good at disappearing in plain sight. Took my usual overwatch spot. Singh checked every man's tourniquet twice and tucked an extra into Kane's vest without a word. The lieutenant stayed behind again, buried in radio discipline and paperwork like those things could hold the ridge. Dusk bled out early. We moved. The drive was a tunnel, trees closing in, snow dusting the road in a slow, relentless sift. The creek kept pace off our right shoulder, water talking low to itself under panes of ice. I killed the engine behind the timber stack, and for a long breath the world sounded like nothing at all. We staged fast, practiced quiet. Hobbs and I hauled the speaker into the trash bend and strapped it behind the rust-peeled fridge. I could smell mildew and mouse nests and that cold metal stink that clings to old appliances. Singh ran the IR line low ankle height, stringing it from the couch frame to a root flare, then another to a stump. Hobbs tucked a fist-sized charge under the rotten cushion, just a flashbang built out of our issued toys. Not enough to kill, just enough to break a rush. Kane sunk a stake for the acoustic logger, then another opposite. Angles measured by eye the way old NCOs still trust. "Brevity word?" Kane asked over local. "No net yet, not until we were ready." "Sable," I said. "Challenge is 1, response is 2. Rotate in 15. Kane nodded. "Move." We slid back into positions. 2 on the road, 1 on thermal, 1 on the net. The timber stack felt smaller than ever. I put the thermal to my eye and let the world wash to ash and white. Breath plumes, the faint living lines of our fingers. The forest beyond, a cemetery of cold trunks. The first knock came like it had been waiting for the clock. 3 knocks, pause. 2, far off, hill left. I glanced at Hobbs. He shook his head once, steady. The net hissed, just hiss, and settled. Kane keyed up on low power, keeping our footprint tight. "Bravo, actual. Challenge 1. I answered. 2, Sable, Hobbs echoed. Sing 2. We were alive inside that little ritual, alive in a way that didn't belong to the trees. Another knock, closer, then one behind us, to the creek. The logger lights blinked, the recorder chewed its tape. I marked bearings on my pad and did the crude math they teach you when you don't have the software. It wasn't random. Those knocks were spacing themselves around our corners. The smell rolled in again. Not a whiff. A wall. Wet fur, copper, rot sunk into bark. It crawled across my tongue into the back of my throat. I swallowed and it was like swallowing pennies. "Thermal?" Kane asked. "Negative," I said, hating the word. "Ambient. Moisture blooms heavy. Trees are cold soaked. If it's there, it's hugging cover." Hobbs lifted his rifle an inch, then set it down. Even that was loud. Radio hissed. A word tried to be born inside it and failed, like the mountain clear-throated and chose silence instead. We waited out our 15. Kane rotated the brevity word like a metronome, sabled a hammer to glass. Challenge 1, response 2. It was a small thing, but it meant the voice on the net would have to learn with us, not ahead of us. At 2:31:17, the hairpin speaker gave a single dead click and then woke up with our own cadence, quietly, just enough to catch ears. I'd recorded it an hour earlier. Kane's baritone calling checks, the rest of us answering. If it learned, it would hear a lesson we designed. Singh's voice touched my ear. Barely more than breath. North-facing slope, listen. I didn't hear knocks. I heard something stranger. Wood shifting, like weight sliding its palm along a trunk. I raised the thermal, searching for seams in the cold. A notch, a streak, anything. Nothing. Then a shape. For 1 second, only one. A broad slab of not cold crossed a gap and vanished. Not heat, less cold, like a thing that had learned to be the temperature of the air. Contact, shadow only, I whispered. 50 meters, bearing 280. Authenticate, Kane said immediately. Challenge 1. 2. Hammer came back. Ours. Clean. Silence came next. The heavy kind, the one that smothers insects, wind, creak. The kind where you start to hear your heart inside your ears and the rubber whisper of glove on rifle grip becomes a scream. The net bent. Static lifted like breath drawing in. Diaz's voice came through, close enough to feel in the soft parts of my mouth. Down. It wasn't a barked command, it was advisory, friendly, the way your own team sounds when they see something you don't. Kane didn't waste a second. Authenticate. Silence. Then the undertone, the second voice riding under the first, pitched up, trying to fit the groove. 2. Hammer. Everything in me wanted to obey the first word anyway. That's what years of training do to your bones. Word arrives, body follows. I didn't move. Neither did anyone else. Decoy up, Kane said. I thumbed at the remote. The fridge spoke with his voice, calm, clipped, wrong only in how perfectly right it was. Bravo, hold, challenge 1. Our own checks came back, layered with the speakers, a harmless confusion soup. If it learned by listening, we were going to teach it noise. Midnight. The knocks came again, now in time with our checks. When we called 1, the hill left gave us 3 slow taps. When we answered 2, the creek threw back 2. The logger lights pulsed like a heartbeat. It's counting, Hobbs said. Let it count the wrong thing, Kane answered. On my mark, peel to the bend. Sing, on Mahoney's line, no gaps. We moved on cadence, not panic. 2 steps back, 2 rifles hold, 2 pass. Then the anchor peels. It's a dance they teach you on flat ranges under halogen lights. A dumb shuffle of geometry. Tonight it felt like threading ourselves down the throat of something awake. The couch flashed white for a fraction of a second. Not the charge. Lightning made of camera bulbs. My night world whited out. I blinked the afterimage of the hairpin in my eyes and saw nothing else. The smash came a breath later. Wood on wood, hard enough to rattle my fillings. The couch bucked, the fridge tipped, the speaker skittered, and then steadied, still talking Kane's clean little lies into the trees. Trip line breached. Singh hissed. I thumbed the second remote without being told. The buried flashbang coughed light and pressure, hard in the gut, sharp in the teeth. A roar answered, angry and frustrated and much too close. We fell back in short slides to the creek. Ice sighed under us. Mist lifted off black water like breath rising from a sleeping animal. Line, Kane said. He sounded tired and unkillable. We built the line, boots toes to bank, barrels up, eyes at different heights so we weren't all looking at the same nothing. The speaker at the bend still muttered discipline. Hold. Challenge 1, 2, glass. The forest muttered back in wood talk. And then they stepped into the places our eyes didn't want to go. Not 1 this time, not 3. More. They didn't rush. They didn't stalk. They arrived. Tall and wrong proportioned, shoulders rolled like stone under wet burlap, hair hanging in mats that caught ice crystals so their edges glittered like they were dipped in starlight. Eyeshine in dots and pairs, low and higher still. The leader's scarred chest, fur torn back to pale, stood where he had stood before, like he owned the spot. He opened his mouth. The speaker at the bend said, "Hold." His mouth said, "Down." The knock said, "1, 2, to match our breath." "Authenticate," Kane said. "Not to them, to us." 2. "Glass," we answered. And the answering made us human again. They moved when we breathed, stopped when we did. A mirror that didn't want to reflect, only to anticipate. The leader took the creek in 2 simple steps. The water didn't argue. Ice plates bumped his shins and spun away. He stopped 3 rifle lengths off Kane and turned his head like a dog listening to the fridge. "Light," Kane said. I hit the IR floods. To the eye, nothing changed. Through the tubes, the world turned into a rinsed bone. The creatures didn't flinch. The leader blinked with the slow indifference of a thing that doesn't mind brightness because it knows night will last longer than any bulb. "Fire on flash," Kane said. No one fired. He didn't mean our flash, he meant theirs. It came from the left, another whiteout, another camera bulb burst, strobing the trunks into a line drawing of itself. Shapes shifted in that fake lightning. 3 to our 9, 2 to our 3, 1 dead ahead in shallow water like a stump uprooted and planted, but wrong. The leader didn't move. He didn't have to. The fridge spoke. "Hold. Challenge 1. The undertone voice crawled up out of the net, wearing Diaz like a mask now. 2. Glass. A child's repeat. The back of my neck prickled. "It's inside our check," I said, and I didn't know if I meant the radio or my ribs. "Decoy to max," Kane said. I pinned the remote and the speaker gave us all of it. "Hold, hold, hold," in Kane's cadence, spooled into the trees, bouncing off the bend, ricocheting between trunks until commands were just shapes with no handles. The leader tilted his head like a thing hearing thunder for the first time. "Now," Kane said. We fired controlled pairs, center mass, adjust, center mass, adjust. Not because we thought bullets stopped mountains, but because a straight line is better than a crooked one, and discipline is better than panic. Splash hammered my thighs, bark flew in plumes, air filled with powder stink. 2 of them fell back, howling, not wounded like men, more offended like a line crossed they hadn't meant to guard tonight. The leader took a round through the fur at his shoulder and turned slow, like he'd been tapped between the shoulder blades by an impolite stranger. He stepped forward. "Peel," Kane said. "Shorts." We slid the line right, 3 meters, then left, 3 meters, stupid little range dance in a place that wanted to make a religion out of our end. The leader adjusted with us, calm, patient. He spoke 1 word, and because the fridge and the net and our own mouths were already full of it, the word turned from command to weather. "Hold." I saw the trip line we hadn't used yet, a dark thread against snow, and got there half a heartbeat early. The last charge cracked the air. The leader stopped. Not afraid, just attending. "Go," Kane said soft, and Singh hauled Hobbs by the collar, and I carried more weight in my hands than a rifle should be, and we bled away from the bank like the creek itself had turned and flowed us downhill. They led us. They walked us parallel in the timber. Equal speed, equal distance. A flank escort. When we stumbled, they paused. When we recovered, they matched. That was worse than being chased. It was being shown a door by something that knew it owned the house. At the hairpin, the fridge finally died with a little cough. The net hissed, emptied, then filled as if the ridge itself leaned in close to the microphone we'd buried. Diaz's voice slid out, no undertone now, or maybe so many beneath that they turned to a single smooth thing. "We taught you to listen." I kept walking because feet know how to save men that brains can't. Kane didn't look back. He never looked back. The creek's voice fell behind us. The road rose. The timber stack hulked into view. The Humvees waited like old dogs that would never ask where we'd been. Only when the doors slammed and the engines turned and tires bit did anyone breathe like they meant to live. No one spoke on the drive down. Even the radios were shy. At the TOC, the lieutenant met us with fresh ink and clean columns. He reached for the truth, and Kane gave him facts that could fit in a line. 2 minor WIA, contact with unknown wildlife, no further pursuit. He didn't write that the mountain borrowed our words and handed them back to us. He didn't write that it counted our steps and timed our reloads and matched our cadence like a drill instructor teaching recruits. He didn't write the worst part, that when we turned our own commands into noise, it stepped aside. Not beaten, but briefly bored. Outside, in the dark between trailers, the ridge looked the same as it always had. A black wall, a shape that makes its own weather. Price stood with his hands in his pockets, watching it like a man staring at an old photograph of someone who never loved him back. "You can leave," he said, without looking over. "It won't follow. It doesn't need to." "Then why let us live?" I asked. He shrugged. "Maybe you learned. Maybe it did." He walked away, and the trailer lights bled a tired glow across snow, narrowed to dirty strips where boots had worried it to slush. Singh sat on a step and took his gloves off and on again and off again until Kane told him to sleep. I lay down on my cot and didn't. The radio on the table didn't, the ridge didn't. When the net breathed hours later, quiet, normal, a far base somewhere talking to another far base about fuel and tires, my body flinched anyway, ready for that single word to shape me. It didn't come. Instead, something stranger happened. In the hush between two distant logistics calls, Wood talked, not through the net, through the wall. A single slow knock, like a polite hand on a door no one had built. Then two, spaced exactly the length of a breath. The recorder in my pocket, habit, now caught it. I played it back with the volume at one notch. On the tape, the knocks fell in time with my heart. I hit stop, and the room went black and quiet, and huge around my little rectangle of plastic and wire. The mountain had said enough. We had too. The rest was waiting. We did not win. We did not lose. We were taught. And somewhere in the trees above Bravo, something large and patient turned our words over in its mouth until they tasted like its own. They'll never put it in the official reports. The Army will bury it as training accidents. The Forest Service will call it superstition. And the locals, they already know better. But out there, in the Appalachian dark, something waits. Something older than our maps, stronger than our weapons, and smart enough to use our own voices against us. We weren't the first to face it, and we won't be the last. So the next time you hear a knock in the woods, don't answer it. If you want more declassified horrors, more encounters the world was never meant to hear, make sure you subscribe to Phantom Warfiles. Turn on the bell, because the next file we open may be the one they never wanted you to know. And remember, in war, the enemy isn't always human.